everyone. Woo, there we go. All right. Welcome to Truth on Trial. I'm Amy Posey. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist here at the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center. We're so thankful that you could be with us for this very important conversation about media literacy and the fight against misinformation. To start off with, I want to thank our moderator, Dr. David Davies, and our panelists for being here. Between the four of them, they have a vast array of experiences and knowledge that they will be able to share with us on their insights on how to deal with misinformation and the solutions to working with this issue. Before we begin, there are several things I wanted to remind you of. First off, this is just the first of several events in our 1-year anniversary. Tomorrow we will have RHCJC Live. It will be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the National Trent Lott Center. Then on Friday night, we're going to have a Night of Stories That Matter with Rick Cleveland, and that will be at 6 p.m. in the Joe Paul Theater. The next thing I want to tell you about is a very special program, especially to my heart, and that is our What is True program. Have you ever seen something online or heard a rumor in your community and wondered, is that true? Well then, our What is True hotline can help you. So, if you have a question, you can email, call, or go to our website and submit that question. And we have a team of graduate researchers dedicated to digging out the truth. In fact, we have a couple of those researchers with us here. Could you please stand up? I told you I was going to call you out. This is Richard Cobb and Matthew Martin. We also have two others, Colby Payton and Molly Gill. They were not able to be here with us today. Our other program that we have is the Ask Me What is True Media Literacy Training Program. This is a program where we go into the community and we train people how to fight back against misinformation. But more importantly, we are teaching them to teach others. If you want to find out more about these programs, you can go to our website, rhcjcnews.com. All right, so that's everything that I have for our introduction. I'm going to hand it over to our What is True team lead, Walker Scott.
Hey y'all, I'm Walker Scott. I'm the Media Literacy Coordinator at the RHCJC. And if you've ever heard of anybody who works in the School of Media and Communications, it's definitely going to be this TikTok famous professor. But aside from his TikTok fame, Dr. Dave Davies has also had a very impressive academic career. Dr. Davies started his career at the University of Arkansas, where he decided that one bachelor's degree wasn't enough. He got a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism and a bachelor's in French. But that also wasn't enough because he pursued a master's in journalism and a master's in American history from Ohio State and USM respectively. He also earned a doctorate from the University of Alabama in mass communication history. Dr. Davies has been with USM for 34 years and counting as a professor, the dean of the Honors College, director of the School of Media and Communication and Journalism, and more. On top of these jobs, he's even written 2 books. The Press and Race, Mississippi Journalists Confront the Movement, and the Post-War Decline of American Newspapers. Today, he teaches courses in writing, editing, reporting, social media, and media history. And more importantly, he's your host tonight for the Truth on Trial panel at RHCJC Live. Please welcome Dr. Dave Davies.
It's so weird. Thank you very much. It's so weird to hear someone reading your biography. That wasn't as long as the one I gave him, but no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm the poor relation on such a distinguished panel. I can't tell you how honored I am, and I'm betting I speak for our panelists in saying what a joy it is for us to be able to get together with all of you tonight to talk about an issue that is of such importance to all of us, misinformation in our society and how to deal with it. But let's give you a little bit of context, excuse me, for our speakers tonight, and I'll introduce them one by one, and then I have the best job in the room, which is to ask questions. And we'll get the discussion started. To our far left, we have Dr. Paul Byers, who is currently an associate professor in the Department of Preventive Medicine, School of Population Health at the include teaching epidemiology to students in the School of Population Health and health-related professions, and to medical students, and working with preventive medicine residents. Prior to that gig, he had a 30-year career in public health at the Mississippi State Department of Health, beginning in 1993. He served in multiple physician leadership roles, most recently as state epidemiologist from 2016 until his retirement from the agency in 2023. That may have coincided with a certain event in 2020 that we'll talk about. During his tenure there, Dr. Byers was involved in many public health responses and led investigations and responses to multiple diseases. Most recently, he was involved in the COVID-19 epidemic, leading and guiding the efforts around surveillance, outbreak, and case investigation. Our next panelist is Katie Weldon with Ingalls Shipbuilding. She's the manager of Integrated Communications and Strategic Marketing at Ingalls, which is a Fortune 500 company, if you didn't know, with over 11,000 employees. At Ingalls, she leads a multidisciplinary team dedicated to sharing the company's mission with internal and external audiences. Through strategic campaigns and authentic storytelling, she connects the craftsmanship of shipbuilding to the broader public while spotlighting the voices of shipbuilders. Before joining Ingalls, Katie served as programming director for the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce and previously managed housing and conference services at USM's Gulf Coast Research Laboratory. She holds degrees in public relations and higher education administration from USM and is committed to leadership, mentorship, and community service. Next, of course, is Dr. Ed Simpson. He really did give me a lot to read, but I've boiled it down. I'm kidding, he's my boss. I get to tease him. Dr. Simpson received his doctorate in 2012 from Ohio University after spending 17 years in the news business. He was bureau chief for United Press International in Charleston, West Virginia, and then served as metro editor and editor for daily newspapers in Ohio and Missouri. He's the author of the book, Rise of the Audience, News, Public Affairs, and the Public Sphere in a Digital Nation. After teaching 8 years at Central Michigan University, where he earned tenure and promotion, he was appointed director of the School of Media and Communication here at USM. He's the primary investigator for our $3 million grant from the Scripps Howard Foundation to establish the nation's first Roy Howard Community Journalism Center. Let's give an advance round of applause for our panel. I do want to say that I think one of the interesting facets of this panel is that we have just about every area of society covered. We have representatives of government, representatives of industry, and representatives of education to talk about this problem of misinformation that we're all dealing with. I'd like to start out by asking our panelists how you would characterize the extent of the problem of misinformation today in 2026. Can you give us your sense of things from your perspective of the problem that we're facing today?
Would you like me to start?
I would love
Okay.
to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Just real quick, the 17 seconds on how we ended up here is we've been working on this project with Scripps for 3 years now, and it's just an amazing journey that we've been on. So thank you to the family, thank you to the foundation. We could do nothing without them. So it's been just a huge journey for us and a real honor. So thank you all for that, and thank you all for being here. That's the best question that we can ask. In my view, this idea of misinformation, disinformation is the existential question of our time. How can we have a democracy if we cannot share a fact? If we cannot look at the same thing and reach similar conclusions, how can we have a democracy? So I believe that this question is the single most important thing that we as a society can tackle right now.
Misinformation isn't new, but all the channels and all the new things that are coming up are new. Misinformation grows and feeds based on those things, based off the audiences. And an audience with a message with no context leads to misinformation and leads to the problem that we're at today. So is it a platform issue? Is it an ethical issue? Or is it human behavior? And I think that's the conversation we're getting into.
No, I love that. And when I think about it too, especially from trying to convey health information to individuals, where you're trying to provide information to protect an individual's health and give them the tools they need. When we talk about misinformation, I mean, just think back, and I'll use the 2009 H1N1 pandemic as an example. During that time, from a public health standpoint, we provided information on immunizations, vaccines, things that individuals could do to protect their health. And we've had such a remarkable change in the perception of how that information is received from medical experts in the last decade and a half or so. Because during that 2009 pandemic, we had individuals lined up. We went to schools, and everybody got vaccinated, and everybody participated in this collective, we're going to try to solve the problem. Now, certainly the 2009 pandemic that was influenza didn't rise to what we had just a few years ago. But I think one of the issues now that we face in 2026, when we talk about misinformation, is that when there is a vacuum of the right information being talked about and talked about frequently and talked about in a way that individuals can understand, where it reaches their culture, where it reaches their language, and they understand the information that's being provided to them. But when there's a vacuum of that information, when there's not that information, the correct information being distributed, then I think that's one of the ways that misinformation fills that void.
Your experience in 2009 versus your experience in 2020. 2009 would have been fairly close after the rise of social media. In all of your estimation, but let's start with you, Dr. Byers, how would you see social media as contributing to the environment that we're in today?
I think highly. And it's not that all social media is bad, but I think one of the things that you see in social media is that a lot of the information is dependent upon anecdotes, anecdotal evidence. I know a neighbor, right, who took this and this happened to them. Or I had a friend or a grandmother or somebody that I knew and that took the vaccine and now somebody's tracking them from the government. And you can't rely on those small individual case reports or anecdotes. It has to be dependent upon the science. But social media is so easy to digest and collect that information and pass it on and amplify it that I think that it really contributes to the problem growing. And that was an issue that we definitely had during COVID.
Panelists, would you all agree?
I agree. I would say too, social media, I had a Facebook page in 2004 when it was just for Harvard students, and I'm pretending I went to Harvard. So I aged myself, but it was very worth it. But I will say this, on social media, the reason that we keep going to it, it's such an easy target, is because there's nobody on social media that's going to hold you accountable like yourself. So you can spew the craziest nonsense you've ever said, and if somebody doesn't agree with you, you can just block them. Whereas, I don't know, after church, if you're meeting with a group or if you're meeting people with coffee and you said that same thing, I can imagine you would see the reactions around the table and somebody to say, why do you think that? Or what's your source on that? Social media provides an easier way, which is good too, for you to block people or to, back to your thing about vacuuming yourself in a group of people who think the same as you. But that's why it goes back to how am I holding myself accountable? What are the things that I know about myself? Social media is an amazing platform and a way to build relationships with people. But again, it goes back to what am I sharing? What's my role in this?
Ed?
Yeah. You're living in a world without editors. That is, in what you see, what you wake up to every morning is a world that has not been filtered through somebody who knows what they're doing with information. This is what you get. It's not good. What would I lay on social media? Almost 100%. When you look at the arc of where our information ecosystem has gone from 2002, 2004, maybe 2005, to where we are now. And if you think about what you see on your own feeds, how much of it do you believe? I don't believe anything unless, I don't believe anything, really, even if I see it's the New York Times, I'll probably wait a day to see if it changes, right? And we can talk more about that if you like. But this idea of a world without editors, Dave, is really scary.
Because, as you're alluding to, the rise of social media corresponds, as we all know, with the decline of the traditional media over the last 20 years and the elimination of all those gatekeepers. So I know we're talking, a lot of our conversation tonight is going to be about solutions, right? And the kinds of initiatives that are being undertaken in the Roy Howard Center, in fact, combat that very thing. But before we get to that, what role should tech companies play in somehow ameliorating this situation? I mean, is there anything that can be done? And I'm glad that Ed still has the microphone so we can talk about the big media picture here.
Yeah.
In Europe, for example, the tradition is to be much more heavy-handed with media in terms of what the media can do. Are there any possible solutions from the 30,000-foot view to address this?
Absolutely. In my view, absolutely. It makes me absolutely crazy that we're not talking about this every single day. Section 230 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 created the world that we're all living in right now. When they said Facebook is not a publisher, it's a platform. So Facebook is not held accountable for the information that it provides because it's from a third party. Same with Instagram, same with TikTok, all of these things. Congress could change this overnight, could almost fix, not completely fix, but address a large part of the issues that we're seeing with social media overnight by repealing Section 230. Treat Facebook, treat Instagram as a publisher. Make them responsible for what they're putting out to the public.
Does anybody want to weigh in on in response to that, panelists?
No, I love that, and it made me think that I'm such a dinosaur, y'all, that I'm not even on social media, and I'm not certain that the social media platforms would welcome that, or that there's a large outcry of the public to welcome that. And one of the ways that we tried to address it was from an agency perspective to join social media and to communicate that way, to try to meet people where they are, which did not ultimately wasn't a great solution, because it just drew more aggressive attention at times.
Would you like to weigh in?
No, he said it.
Okay, way to go, Ed. I think I'm really struck by the challenges of what we're going to do next. And it strikes me that if while we're waiting for Congress to act, that we have to take other actions. What are those actions? What can we in medicine and business and in the academy do to help with this situation?
The next best thing. And the world is changing so quickly. And you and I talked about this right before this started. In a world where this stuff is happening, there's no ethical solution. There's no corporate policy. I know y'all know what I'm talking about. There's no board or a committee who's going to say, that's wrong, we need to do this. It's moving too fast. AI is a great example. But when it comes to misinformation, it's another one of those things of, again, what's the next best thing to do? What's the next best thing to do? and you got to be transparent. You have to own what you say and believe what you say. I really do want to blame BuzzFeed for starting all of this with their clickbait headlines. And it seems like an easy out, but it really is. They saw that people were clicking these things because the headline was very misleading. And then you would read the article and you're like, wait, that's not what I was clicking on at all. And now we're where we're at now. So, from the industry standpoint, what am I communicating? I'm holding myself accountable. Factual? Am I sourcing everything? Am I telling people when they're going to see it again? I want to highlight, there's some people from Ingalls here tonight. We have our Vice President of Communications, Kimberly Nastasi, and the Manager of Stakeholder Engagement, Lisa Bradley. Wave your hands, y'all. But
Welcome.
we also have the CEO of the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce, Ben Weldon here, Dr. Ben Weldon. But it's about they deserve it. It's surrounding yourself with people who are going to push that. Are we doing enough? Are we doing the next best thing? Is what we're saying factual, true, and again, consistent? Because you can't have 1 week where you're putting this out and the next week they don't hear from you. What does that create? Mistrust. Ingalls right now is going through a lot of communication stuff. We're going through a collective bargaining agreement, which is basically if you're a union employee, you're voting on whether or not you want this to pass. And it's a great example of the misinformation if you don't trust your company and what your company's saying, there's going to be people that say things and get riled up and go, when you have somebody who hates like the same person, the bond you have is incredible, right? And that's what it feels like sometimes when you're communicating with employees. But it was what I'm saying, factual. Can they back it up? And if they can do that themselves, you're creating that own trust. Because again, in our organization, Ingalls isn't a real person. It's a lot harder to hate the person who's writing that, who has a face to it, versus a company, right? Sorry, very long.
No, that was quite on task, and it strikes me that business, by being constantly held to the standard of transparency, in fact, might have a clearer path in some of these other areas we're talking about, education and medicine.
Yeah,
Dr. Simpson?
I think we have got to ask our public education system to make media literacy a priority. This idea of we have to teach folks that this is a fact, this is what a fact looks like, this is how you check a fact. When Diane and I were growing up, we kind of did this naturally, sort of, right? We read the newspaper every day. We read what folks who thought about this and did it for a living said, right? And then we read it again the next day, and sometimes it changed. But in a world without editors, in a world without filters, folks have to be their own editors. And that you're not born with that. You have to learn it. So I think media literacy, which I could talk all night about what we need to put in media literacy, but I think that big umbrella, that's the first step. Talking to our state education leaders, talking to higher education about if we have a university student that graduates without understanding the principles of media literacy, higher education has failed. If we graduate high school students that do not know what a news story is, cannot figure out the difference between a headline and what goes underneath it, just as a citizen, education has failed. Democracy will fail. Our society will fail if we cannot do these kinds of straightforward things.
Thank you.
And I love the idea of transparency and consistency in the message too. And I think one of the lessons that we've learned when trying to communicate public health or medical information that we found, especially during COVID, is that the messaging changed frequently as we discovered more, as we caught up to what the virus was doing, as the science caught up to it. And I think that although there was not necessarily a lack of transparency, I think there was a perception that there was. And our messaging has got, and I know I've said this before, but it's got to be in a simple package that really conveys what you're trying to say. You can't go through communicating with the public that this is why vaccines are good, this is what the data shows, this is the side effect. What you have to say is vaccines save lives, and reach the parents and reach the people where they are. And it's got to be consistent, and it's got to be understandable, and I love the idea of transparency.
I want to talk a little bit more about COVID, because that is such a test case for what the dangers that we're talking about here tonight. Can you talk a little bit about the lessons you learned from COVID? And you just touched on it just then, but I'm really curious. I mean, Ed is talking about a danger to democracy. You're talking about a danger that all businesses face, and then you're looking at a danger of really life and death. So how in the next COVID, what are we going to do in this era of vaccine skepticism in 2026?
Well, I hope that we're prepared, right? Because one of the things that we find is that we tend to repeat the mistakes of the past. And you learn a lot of lessons, but they don't always translate far into the future. But from a standpoint of communication, I think one of the biggest lessons that we really learned was that the landscape was different, that the public, and rightfully so, questions and has questions about the information that you give. And so the information that you provide to people, although the message has to be relatively simple and clear, it has to be backed by data. And it has to be backed by evidence that's peer-reviewed and actually demonstrates the validity of a treatment, of an action, of a behavioral change that allows that individual to protect themselves or their family or to stay in good health. And you have to do it in a way, and this was a big lesson that we learned, because it's very easy to stand up in front of people and say, this is true because I'm telling you this, and this is what you have to do to protect yourself. And that's not necessarily well received. One of the biggest lessons we learned was when communicating to groups of people, it helps if you have trusted partners in that community who look, speak, act, and are part of that community to give that message. And that's where it's better received, on the ground. Now, it's important to be upfront on the podium, giving the scientific evidence, giving the information, making sure that everybody understands what are the right things that they need to do to protect themselves. But the way that you really reach somebody is in that one-on-one community center, having those trusted partners who can look and speak like the people that you're trying to reach. And that's where we made the greatest successes in our efforts. And I think that's a big lesson that we have to have moving forward, is that that's an important part, and that has to be done first, not last.
Ed, can you follow up on that? It seems to me that some of the principles just discussed, in fact, shed light on what you're trying to do and what is true in the Roy Howard Center. Could you talk a little bit about that initiative and the principles underlying that effort?
Yeah, exactly. So the idea behind the whole concept of the What is True program is that there is a constant flood of information coming into your world, right? And it's almost always coming from social media in some fashion or another. And in that format, everything looks the same. Everything reads the same. And if you understand that there are no editors, then you have to have your radar up, and we need to teach people to have their radar up all the time about what is true. Is what I'm seeing true? So the idea is there is a resource out there for Southeast Mississippi that if you have that question, we'll give you an answer. You may not like the answer, by the way, but we will find an answer for you. And we will give not only that, but we will help educate you on when you see these kinds of things, here are some ways to process that information so it does not tilt you one way or another. So that's exactly the whole genesis of the What is True program. why we're going out there all the time and why we're putting such energy into it. Because I believe, and I know Nicole, our center director, believes, that unless you have the ability to understand what is a fact, what is not a fact, and what that fact means, you cannot have a community. You cannot have a shared existence where you govern yourself.
Are there lessons that all of us can take from these principles that our panelists are discussing to try to deal with misinformation in our daily lives, with our friends, with our family? Kind of a grenade question, but how do you? It's one thing to talk about this in the aggregate. How do you deal with it on a personal level, each of you?
I can start. I don't want to keep. I don't want to dominate. So just grab the mic whenever you like. So there are some absolutely concrete things that you can do, and we have a whole bunch of them on rhcjc.com, or I'm sorry, rhcjcnews.com, where you go to the What is True page, and there's all kinds of stuff there. But basically, the idea is when you see something that is clearly designed to make you feel an emotion, question it. Don't share it, question it. When you see something that does not make sense, question it, don't share it. Don't become part of the problem. When you see something that is clearly designed to make somebody look evil or a saint, question it, don't share it. That's probably not journalism, that's probably something else. So the number one thing that we teach people is pause, think, engage, and make it a conscious decision on whether you're sharing something or not. And if there's any doubt at all, don't share it. Don't become part of the problem. The other thing, and this is what we teach all the time, shape your feed. Shape your feed. Teach the algorithm that you want all different kinds of information coming to you. You don't want to see my feed. I have about 90 different news outlets coming into my feed, from far right to far left to whatever. And the idea is that I want to see what everybody's talking about. And I encourage everybody to do that. Shape your feed. That means you're going to have to confront information occasionally that you disagree with, that may make you angry. And you know what? That's okay. Democracy is occasionally going to make you angry. That's all right. We can do that. So that's what we teach. Those are some very concrete principles that we can all take away.
Completely agree. And my dad always said, when you're recounting a story or you're telling a story, you stick to the facts, right? Unless it's an opinion piece. But other than that, recite the facts every single time. But I think the biggest thing too, and I think you've touched on that a lot, is the relationships that you build. So if there's anything here, earlier I think somebody said, I'm an introvert, but I'm trying to be an extrovert. It's really hard, right? But those relationships matter. Going back to having somebody that looks like you, that speaks like you trust that information. It's our job as communicators, it's your jobs as journalists to be in your community and be present. And be present means different things now. That could be in person at these town halls like we're talking about, but that's also being present online. Are the things that you're posting factual? Can people believe what you're saying? Do you believe what you're saying? And that comes with an understanding of yourself. What are your boundaries? What are my ethics? What do I believe in? And you have to stand by that every single day. And to the students, it takes a while. It takes a while to understand who you are and what you're communicating. But it's also practice. You have to believe what you're talking about. If you don't believe in it, then you're just doing something else. I mean, you're not supposed to, what is it? Like, if you love your job every day, it's not a job. Well, you got to make money. And the way to do that is to be factual. You got to have job security, and people have to believe what you're saying so that you can keep going, so that you can help people like Dr. Byers communicate this stuff out one day.
And I was thinking too that when you're trying to talk to somebody, you have to stick to the facts. You have to stick to what's true when you're trying to relay information. But it's also important to have that level of respect and not to aggressively try to change somebody's mind, because if you do that, you're really not getting anywhere, because there are a lot of people you're not going to change their mind. What your job is as a communicator is to state what's true, what's the fact, what does the evidence show. This is not an opinion, and I'd like for you to do something with that information. But there's always going to be people that you are not going to change their mind, and you cannot get aggressive with them, because that doesn't change anything, okay? You have to conduct yourself with and respect that individual as well.
As if we didn't have enough media revolutions to deal with, on the heels of social media, now we are entering a revolution wrought by artificial intelligence. Can each of you talk a little bit about how this phenomenon of AI is going to change our world, but especially might change our perspectives on misinformation? What are the pitfalls of AI in this regard? Is it too early to tell? What are your opinions?
It's not too early to tell, and you need to be honest with yourself. How many of you used ChatGPT to create that portrait of yourself as a cartoon recently? Aha! I knew it. And that's okay. But I think it's a great example of how AI is being used by everybody. It's not just being used by, these big businesses or medical or education. It's being used by everybody. It's being used by my mom, and she's got to stop. She has to stop. But we can see with AI, right? AI has bias. AI is biased, right? Who created AI? Who is the founder? If you look up a picture, it's a middle-aged white person, okay? It is inherently biased. You have to train your algorithm to learn the way that you do and to look at different perspectives. It really just depends on the field that you're in. If you're creating cartoons of yourself, you probably had to ask it 5 different times to not give you 7 fingers, okay? But how do you communicate that to your audience? How do you talk to your audience about that? And do you know your audience? I can guarantee you when we're talking about the algorithm and the feeds like that, half the time I see a video, and I do this to my husband all the time, I'm like, that's AI. That's not a real kangaroo jumping on a trampoline. But how's that going to morph from here? Especially in the next phase, if we're talking about vaccines or God forbid something else happens, what is the information we're looking at? And it goes back to that literacy and understanding, but it's only going to be getting worse from here. So it's really about challenging yourself. What do I know about this system, and how do I tell my team, my colleagues, the community that I'm in, that what I'm putting out is not generated by this, but I'm learning with you,
I mean, I'm the videos, my appreciation of video has just been totally obliterated.
I don't believe
Because you get, was the bunny on the trampoline or not? I mean, it's going to change our perspectives incredibly in the next few years.
Well, so what's interesting is that the latest information from Pew Research is that fewer than 50% of U.S. adults are now even reading the news. They don't trust anything. And every month, every week, every day, every hour, we're losing trust, not just in our institutions, but in the information that we see every single day. We're losing trust in each other because we don't know what to believe. AI is putting that on steroids. So what do we do about it? We need our legislators to weigh in. We need our folks to say, we need the folks who are supposed to be watching this kind of thing, pass regulations to say, no, we're not going to do this kind of thing. This is damaging to society. This is damaging to our information ecosystem. We're not going to do it. We need Congress to act. We need our Mississippi legislature to act. We cannot listen to the White House and say there can be no regulations on AI because of the obvious reasons. We need to push back on that. We saw what happened with social media. We saw what that created. There's no reason to believe that 5 years from now, we won't be thinking the same thing about AI, if not 2 years from now.
And there are some parts of AI that do have some interesting implications. When one of the things that we've tried to do is try to consider how can we utilize AI in the field of epidemiology and investigation in the background. and use these algorithms to help us more quickly identify outbreaks so that we can put in place public health actions. But, that's still a long way off for us. There are efforts to do that, but we're not there yet. But, I mean, for goodness sakes, don't go to ChatGPT for medical advice, because if you do, it's going to be wrong, I promise you.
I think we're to the point in the program where we would open it up for questions. What process would you like us to follow? Is somebody going to run a microphone to audience members? Whitney? Perfect. Thank you. This has been a really vibrant discussion, but as we so often see in panels like this, often the discussion goes even farther when we turn it on to questions. So what questions or comments do you all in the audience have, either to build on some of the points that we've discussed or take us in a new direction in terms of how misinformation is changing and challenging our society? Yes.
So I just want to stay on the topic of social media platforms and AI. These days you have, I'll just say you have like X or Twitter, you have Grok. Every single post that I go down, you see somebody asking me, Grok, is this true? Grok, what does this mean? And the thing that I struggle with is, how do you go about telling people who put so much trust in this artificial intelligence that it's not always going to be correct, especially with medical advice, or political things, or crime that you might see on there? How do you go about telling people that that is not, you can't trust it all the time?
Okay, I'll repeat the question just for the benefit of the screen. The question is, how do we go about dealing with our friends and neighbors who might believe AI, and how can we teach them that they don't need to believe everything that Grok or any of the other AI platforms tell them? Do y'all have some handy advice?
I'm going to pass it to him, but before I do I don't think those people want to know that Grok is incorrect. And I think that's a hard pill to swallow. It goes back to what we were saying earlier. It might make you angry, but you can shout it from the rooftops as much as you want and be, really solid in what you're saying. But those people, by that point, they don't want to believe it. And that's really hard when you have that kind of audience.
It's so quick and convenient, too. I mean, it's easy to do it.
Yeah, I think you can't give up. And I think you have to continually point out, gently and with love, that is not correct, and offer new information. I will tell you that the information out there, there's a lot of good studies that have been done that show it's almost impossible to change somebody's mind. But what you can do is be a very positive influence on those around you, and that's constantly, I would argue, constantly saying, well, that's not quite true. There's a really good video out there, and I do believe it's true. I think it's true. Pretty sure it's true. Where this guy is going around asking folks about tariffs, and the question is, who pays for the tariffs? And he's like this Nobel economic guy. I mean, it's like the guy who knows about tariffs. And over again, they say, well, China pays the tariffs. For if it's put on China, then China pays it. If it's put on Brazil, then Brazil pays it. And so he's walking them through, no, this is how it actually works. And they're having an argument with this guy who has a Nobel Prize in economics. But you don't give up, and it's okay to have that civil discussion. And I always talk to my students about this idea of having a civil discussion about, here's some other things that you can look at. So don't give up.
That's
really good question.
That's a great question, but I think I worry that it's so difficult in 2026. The temptation is to pull back and not wade in. But I think what you're saying, and maybe our challenge, is to wade in anyway, with all due love and respect.
With all love and respect. Dave makes fun of me all the time. I say, with all love and respect. Yeah. No, that's exactly. We can't give up. You can't give up. You can't give up. You can't give up. I tell that to my students all the time. You can't give up. If you give up, what's left? Right? If you give up, where do you go? We're going to go further and further and further into our silos. There's a really interesting study out there, a survey out there that asks folks, and they've done this, they've asked the same question now for something like 70 years. And they go, how many close friends do you have? 50 years ago, anybody want to guess what the answer was? 50 years ago, Whitney, you're saying 2? 50 years ago, you're saying 2? 5, 10. Okay. 50 years ago, the answer was between 8 and 10. The last time they did it, which was 2 years ago, anybody want to guess what the answer was? 2. In a time of social media, in a time when tech bros are telling us that we are more connected and more engaged and more together than ever, we're not. We're more separated, we're more isolated than we've ever been before. And it's because, in my view, and I know I'm biased, you know, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right, Dr. Davies?
Exactly.
But in my view, it's because we don't share information. We don't pick up a newspaper every morning and have the same information presented to us. We don't watch the evening news together anymore. We're getting everything through an unfiltered, unedited maelstrom of information. Well, what that means is, who do you believe? Who do you rely on, right? So don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. Shape your feed. Stay connected with each other, right? With all love and respect. Try to be together. And that's where we're at.
Another question.
Oh, well, I was just going to add real quick, if
Oh,
it's
I'm sorry.
okay. Along the don't give up lines, are y'all familiar with the measles outbreak that's occurring in South Carolina right now? The largest one that we've had so far. It actually dates back to the previous year, where they had more than 300 cases and now have more than 900 cases. And I know the state epidemiologist in South Carolina well, and she has an almost weekly press conference where she is not giving up. She is giving the information. She's giving the details. She's opening up vaccination clinics, even though the number of individuals who are attending those clinics to get vaccinated are dropping repeatedly. As a professional, it is her job, and a lot of times you're going to find that you have a job where you cannot give up. Your job is to give that information, and you have to continue to do it. And if you have to modify the way you're doing it, then you got to be willing to change gears.
Thank you. I saw a hand in the back. Yes, please.
I'm currently working on a project of how like certain keywords affect viewership on news articles. And this started with the notion I had that I believe that misinformation starts from started because news outlets, they started believing that if the title is more reactionary, then they will have more people watching them. So how would you say we'll be able to make these new articles more attractive to people without having those reactionary words?
And am I summarizing your question to be something along the lines of, how do we move beyond clickbait? Okay, how do we move beyond clickbait, panel?
I heard him clear his throat, so I'm going to
Well, I would argue, and I make this argument all the time, I'm not sure anybody believes me, great journalism attracts audience. I've seen it over and over and over again. Great journalism attracts audience. That clickbait stuff is the easy, and it's wrong. And I think that good journalists need to call it out and say it's wrong. Don't do it. That's unethical. That's an unethical thing to do. Now, when we teach headline writing, we teach, Dr. Davies, how to be interesting. But we also say that you must be interesting, and I got a couple of my students in here, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but you must be interesting and be fair, accurate, and true at the at the same time, right? So we don't give up, we don't give in to this idea that the only way to make money in media is to be clickbaity, to attract eyeballs through whatever means necessary. We don't give up. We don't teach that. We don't condone it. We call it out when we see it.
Completely agree. And in a world where everybody reads in emojis, I just say leave the emojis out of your headline.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
When you're trying, for example, the media, stories about measles outbreak and all that, and you're giving factual information. But it seems like, from what you said earlier, that you need to not just give factual information, you have to find methods of getting that information to people so that they will believe it. So it's like, it seems to me to be a two-step process. You can't just go on the news and say, these are the facts, because people aren't necessarily going to believe that. So now you have to dig deeper and find people, in communities that speak the language, or like them, to now take your information and put it into the community from someone that will believe them. You have to find, I guess, seeds in the community.
That's
To get that information, that somebody's going to listen to it.
right. So the question is, giving scientific information is important, but also finding those community leaders, those community partners to help convey that message in a way that individuals understand. And I think both are important, but it's important also to find a balance between them. And one of the things that we did was we brought our trusted partners into the building with us and met with them and listened to their feedback on how our messages that were heavily science-based, right, about this is what's going to happen if you don't do this, and these are the dangers that you're going to have, and this is what you need to do, and this is what the data shows. And to get feedback from those community partners on how that message is being received. Are there trust issues from the community that we haven't yet addressed, right? Because there can be a distrust of the government and a distrust of medicine, especially based on some historical things that have occurred. And so it's important to meet them where they are. But then once you identify those individuals, one of the ways we did was we had our trusted partners come to the agency and be vaccinated on TV so that their community could see that these are the people who are getting vaccinated. These are the leaders in your community, and they're standing up and they're showing you what's right, and they're saying, wear a mask, get vaccinated. And that is where we really turn the edge, I think, turn the corner.
Thank you. I'm just struck by the need that even somebody in a position like yours as the state epidemiologist would still need to take those additional measures to build trust, but with the public. But that's the world we're living in the 2020s.
Yeah, it is, and we got death threats, and we had lots of folks who were very angry at us just for trying to tell the truth and do it in a consistent manner. But and again, I said this earlier, but because the landscape was changing so rapidly that I think it made it what we were saying an easier target. We were targets in it,
And it was, please.
So, as an internal comms person, half and half, do you know what the hardest thing to do as a communicator for an internal comms person is to have a deskless workforce of 8,000 people that you're trying to communicate with. So you identify the problem. These people do not have access to a computer to get company information, especially if you're in shipbuilding. There's a lot of things that you just can't put on Facebook. It's sensitive information. So the Ingalls team got together and we said, how can we create these communities? How can we find those influencers of shipbuilding in our own core group? And so we created a communications council where we brought representatives in from each department and we said, hey, these are the things that we're communicating. Give us your complete feedback. Like, what are your thoughts? And getting that feedback from them allowed us to see, like, okay, there's a huge communication gap between a director level and, let's say, somebody who's working at the bottom of a ship, right? Completely understandable. But for us, that sparked another idea. Why don't we create a group, and we're going to call them culture connectors, of people who are influencers inside of the shipyard. You can self-identify, or a lot of people were nominated. You bring all of those people together and you share the same information in one space. These are people that, shipbuilders trust. You believe what's coming to them. The things that they say, they're very, influential. Put them all in a room. We tell them the things that we're trying to communicate, the initiatives that we have, projects we have coming up, really great ideas. We're trying to get shipbuilders involved. And then from there, it is their job, they sign up for this, it's their job to go spread that word to at least 10 to 20 people, 10 to 20 shipbuilders. Whether they're on the deck plate with them or they're out at the grocery store and they see a shipbuilder, they go and they share this message. And it has been incredible. People want to be culture connectors. They want to be a part of that shift. And it goes back to just having that positive energy. You want to hear good things. You want to hear these things coming from people that you see and, interact with every day. But that was just one solution of how do we communicate with these people when they don't even have devices or computers or anything like that. You use the people around you. You use those relationships, the people that they trust.
Thank you. It's really interesting. Yes.
I think for me, social media, there's two things that I think are being destroyed or stripped away when it comes to social media. And that's historical experience, like those elderly, people who have lived through it, been through it, seen it, and touched it. And the other part is curiosity, right? The answers are so simple and they're so rapid. You don't go to look, and you're no longer curious. You think you got it right. So you don't go to the encyclopedia, you go to your library and you talk to the librarian or a teacher. So you're losing these two large components. But in particular, I wanted to ask either of you, kind of it's different in different cases. When it comes to medicine, and you're talking about reaching into the community, like measles, I think people forget what measles even looked like because it was eradicated, right? But when it happens to someone, all of a sudden you care more, and that reality becomes real. One, how do you change that? And is in changing that maybe the elderly, the people who actually experience it and can talk about it more. And the reason it comes to mind is I recently was in Idaho and there's a center called Boston Center, and they did historical records and had actual conversations with survivors of the Holocaust. And they used AI to generate the image where you can stand there and have a literal conversation with a Holocaust survivor. And it made it so much more tangible to see and engage and interact with that person. So that's one. But then when it comes to business, and I'm hoping each one of you can speak about it from your own perspective. When it comes to business, what I see a lot is large companies are getting rid of older employees. The ones who would trickle down information and experience of how it works, how to create work-life balance, all of these different things that you get in 30 years, or even the newsrooms or losing these reporters who've been around on the beat and know all these different aspects and have all these experiences that they can share with the younger generation of reporters. But in business, you see it move away from older employees and you see trying to bring in younger employees who may cost less but don't have all the experience. And then when it comes to education, we see an attack on colleges about the language that's used. And you clean out words that actually bring about curiosity, right? You're taking away, the books are being taken away. You can't say global warming, or you can't say DEI, or all of these terms. But that's where curious students get into the weeds and we have debate and conversation. So I'm interested from all of your three perspectives. Do you see the same thing where that's being removed? And how do you address it? Or how do you embrace it and create something different that allows us to move beyond it?
So if I'm hearing correctly, it's how do we retain that historical perspective, that historical knowledge, that institutional knowledge that we've had from people who've experienced it, and how do we give them a voice to be able to participate in the conversation and maybe change things? And that's such a great message, because you think about measles, a lot of people don't remember what measles was like. People don't remember what polio was like. And, hundreds of children died from measles every year in the United States before we had a vaccine. And we actually were one of the few countries who was able to declare measles eliminated in 2000 from the United States because we had no endemic transmission. What that meant was no transmission within the United States that originated in the United States. Our only handful of cases were those that were imported from other countries where people were exposed outside of the United States and then brought it here, and there was limited transmission. We're on the verge of losing that now. And I think it's because people have forgotten what measles looks like, what it does, what are the long-term ramifications for it, and how dangerous and deadly it can be. One of the things we found is that people understood that and understood how devastating things could be, but unless it happened to them, right? Unless it happened to somebody who they knew or directly happened to them, then it was always those other people. One of the ways that we found that was interesting to combat that was having individuals who experienced things like COVID or the loss of a child or getting that vaccine tell their personal stories. And when people did that, and that evolved through the COVID pandemic, I think that's how we were able to connect people, how we were able to get that information, but also to listen to the elders who had experienced pandemics in the past to explain that. And I think one of the things that we're in danger of right now when it comes to institutional knowledge is that we have an eroding public health infrastructure. If you look at CDC, we have a lot of institutional knowledge that is no longer there. And when you lose that, especially when we think about plans for preparing what comes next, because I'm here to tell y'all that we will have another pandemic. I don't know when it'll be, but we will have another one, okay? In the not too distant future. Maybe in some of our lifetimes again, there will be another pandemic, okay? And so we have to be able to have the knowledge to use what we've learned now to build on that, and we can't erode our public health infrastructure. So what you're saying is right on point.
Thank you, Dr. Byers. Appreciate it. And great question. I can't speak for the tech bros, as we're calling them, but I can speak to the people who have craft as a trade. The people, the workforce who work with their hands every single day. That's like sitting down in your kitchen with your grandmother and her teaching you how to make her own lasagna. For those tradespeople, it's almost impossible to have a company without them. Ingalls has a program called Master Shipbuilder, and every single year we celebrate shipbuilders who have been with the company over 40 years. And every year it's between, 20 to 50, people who have worked with us for over 40 years. Last December, we held a long service program to highlight the people who had been at Ingalls more than 25 years. And there was a shipbuilder there who had been there 55 years. 55 years. And that is celebrating that older generation. But not only that, when we go out, as internal comms people, we're trying to tell the story. We're trying to tell the story from a different perspective. And when we go and we ask the older generation, like, tell me how you got here. Who taught you this? Most often we hear them say, nobody has ever asked me that. Nobody has ever asked me to tell our story. So I think it's all about, does my company believe in the transfer of knowledge of this? Do they invest in these things? Do I see that being passed down through generations? There's generations of shipbuilders out there, fourth generations. That's really something to be proud of, but it's going to a company that believes in that. And that's really hard to do. And, when you're looking at the tech stuff and you're looking at all these different places, but you know what's in demand? People working with their hands. We have ships to build for the Navy and we can't get enough people. But you know who we crave? The people from the older generation who've been doing this and they've been doing it well and it hasn't changed. They show up every single time and it goes back to that consistency. But it's about believing in the company too, that they want those people to be there and surrounding yourself in that type of environment. Does that answer your question from the business side? A little bit.
Well, I'm gonna go away from the premise just a little bit. I do think there's clearly in higher education and all education, there's definitely a brain drain as folks retire and leave, and that we lose that institutional knowledge, and that's huge. But I think it's much more fundamental than that. When you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and when you talk about words being banned from classrooms, books being banned from classrooms, it's far more fundamental than that. And so we actually went through that in our school here on our campus with House Bill 1193, which is the anti, and we always forget to put the anti on it, which makes me crazy, but it's anti-DEI. So there was the idea that, well, what can we now teach? What can we now talk about? So what we talked about in our school was, we're not changing nothing. We're not going to obey in advance. We're going to teach what we think needs taught. And we're going to teach it the way we've always taught it. Because the way we've always taught it was the right way to teach it. If you got a problem with that, then you can come see me. So I think that we have to have courage. I think we have to look the issues in the eye and say, here are the issues, and have a discussion about it. And I think that this idea that somehow ideas are dangerous, that words are dangerous, is nonsense. We need to call it out as nonsense. And I think that that's something that we have lost, that sense of courage and community from those who are older and who have been there. They've been through the fire. They've seen the fight. They've lost a few. I've lost more than a few, but I've won a couple. Yeah, a couple. And you don't, again, I go back to, you don't give up. You never give up. You never say die. You forward, but you do it in a way with courage and with heart. That's what I would argue. Yeah.
A couple of times we've said don't give up, and I think that's as good a phrase as any to wind down our program. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Media literacy is definitely at the heart of everything that we do here at the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center. It's the reason that I decided to hang up my hat as a reporter and go back to public relations, which is something I swore 7 years ago I would never, ever do again. But I believe in the mission here at the center, and so I decided it was time to come back to this, and I'm so glad that I have. So I wanted to remind everyone one last time before we leave of our other events this week. Tomorrow we have RHCJC Live, which is an open house student showcase in career development. That is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the National Trent Lott Center. And then Friday at 6 p.m. we have a Night of Stories That Matter with Rick Cleveland, and that is 6 p.m. at the Joe Paul Theater. All right, thank you so much again for being here. We have appreciated it.